Hey everybody, this is Shifting Happens. Marshall the Marshall, double wave yellow with you with Ajit.
What's up?
How
What's
you
up?
doing?
How's it going?
How you
I'm
doing,
going. I'm
Ajit?
going. I mean, I just got off work, so you know, it is what it is. But it's good. It's good. Great to be on.
So we're
How are you?
we're debuting we're debuting a new feature on the channel here tonight. This is the Marshall's Post, and this is episode 1. And we got a little bit of a big deal to talk about. I know Baxty and Shez, they talked about this a little bit, and we've got more news today coming out about the race director's unceremonious dismissal from the from the FIA post, and it seems that he's admitted to BBC that he was fired, and contrary to the statement where he was walking away. So, shall we say, there's a bit more intrigue at the FIA. What's your thoughts on this, Ajit?
I mean, where do we start? It's first off, we're never gonna get the full picture of everything until we get a biography from Wittich. But then again, this is not the first quote unquote dismissal from the FIA for that race director position in a while. We've had so much of that recently. And I don't know. I don't know. All I can think about is why. And before I get into my whys, because I think you're going to cover some of it, but this has sort of fingers of, big MBS all over it, not being happy with it.
Absolutely. And this is, I was actually going to touch upon it. This is the 4th race director in 4 years, because after Michael Massey was let go or shown the door after Abu Dhabi 2021, Wittich and Freitas shared the role. Freitas decided it wasn't for him, or they decided he wasn't for them, and they gave the full-time role to Wittich. And now here we are, not even a full season after Freitas departed the shared race director role, and the position is moving on to Rui Marques. So the 4th person to take this role in 4 seasons. It's not looking good for continuity, and it really stands opposed to what MBS himself was talking about how these roles are very difficult to fill, and how you need to train these people up in order to retain them, because race directors don't grow on trees. Having the people that have this expertise, there's not very many of them, and they're going to go through this pool very quickly if they don't manage to recruit and retain. And retention seems to be an issue here of the day.
I mean, that leaves more openings for people like you to apply, no? It just gives you a reason to go for it and fix the FIA, or at least fix race control.
Right?
Yeah.
But I mean, I just wanted to get into a few of the reasons here, and I'll just hit a couple of points. Like, a lot of the reaction to this was about a couple of things that had happened prior to announcement, or this shocking news, and that was a pretty unbalanced weekend in Brazil with regards to the changes or the issues at race control. And I think that we talked about this on our last episode, and I'd recommend everyone go back and watch our post-Brazil coverage, because I think a lot of that was overblown. I think a lot of people confused the role of the stewards with the role of the race director. Stewards' decisions and penalties and racing rules, that stuff doesn't have anything to do with Wittich, and he doesn't, like, they operate independently of one another. As for the decisions that Wittich made in that race or in that weekend, with different red flags, VSCs, timing, I would say that all of them were defensible calls and had a logic to them. It's just a matter of whether you agree or disagree with, or would have done it the same way. The only one I think that really stuck out at me was the late call to abort the start. That was one that was a little bit inexplicable, but I mean, in the moment, I'm sure he had his reasons for that as well. I think a lot of times, no matter what the race director decides in these moments, there's going to be people who say they did the wrong thing. And we kind of went through all those different red flag calls, went through the reasoning on why that would be. I really don't think it has anything to do with Brazil. And I think, as you kind of hinted to, and I'll let you take it here, there was a particular letter that got sent the week before that might have a little bit more to do with this, but kind of tangentially, but who knows?
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure whoever is keeping up to date with F1 would have seen the GPDA statement that was released, I think about 7 days ago now, 8 days ago. It was after Brazil, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, correct me if I'm wrong there. And it essentially calls out MBS at some point for the way he speaks and criticizes people, as well as the FIA in general, for being harsh on drivers swearing and needing to focus more on what happens on track. Now, the FIA fining drivers for swearing does not make sense. And in my opinion, I don't think it has anything to do with the race director in any way, shape, or form. That is more the FIA. I believe it's I can't remember which role it was. Who was the guy who left today? Was it him? Under his purview?
No, that was the compliance director. It's more directly like the FIA competition, like the council, MBS directly, kind of doing these things. At an organizational level, rather than, it's the FIA sanctioned press conferences too. It's not like they're fining people for swearing on the radio, because that falls under F1's, F1's media. It's just the FIA mandated press conferences, which is a very limited set of media engagements on the course of a weekend. Like, as you can see, Max's protests, I don't think we've really even noticed it, because he can still talk to the media in his own country and any other country and say whatever he wants. It's just he's only protesting the official FIA press conference, which is quite a minor deal. And it's just, I don't know. It seems like trying to control something that isn't really in your lane. But you had made oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that, like what you're saying, right? Before we digress too far away, jumping onto that, I feel, talking about trying to control things that are out of their lane, I feel like if you look deeper into the entire situation of things that have happened with MBS over the last few years, he seems to want to be in control of everything and anything that happens in and around F1. Right? And part of me can't shake off that it was him and Wittich butting heads, because if we're talking about calls that race directors have made, in all honesty, I don't think this year has been bad by any way, shape, or form. We've had significantly worse years and significantly more questionable calls by the race director. Wittich has been pretty decent this year, and it doesn't make sense to me. And yeah, it just doesn't really.
And that's the thing, is like any of the more controversial calls have had sort of a backing logic to them. Now, I do think that, it's probably likely that there was a falling out. And I'm looking at the BBC report, because the other news that you kind of hinted to was Paolo Basari has left the FIA as the compliance officer. And he was the official within the FIA that investigated the official complaint against Mohammed Ben Sulayem last year, that alleged that he had tried to have the Vegas race was called off and that he had tried to influence a penalty being rescinded on Alonso. And that complaint was found to be baseless. But it's kind of interesting that Paolo Basari has left, given that he was falling foul of Ben Sulayem before. Now, he compiled the report though that did exonerate Ben Sulayem. So the quote from Andrew Benson says that he's said to have pushed back or tried to navigate around a number of requests that Ben Sulayem had made. And Ben Sulayem took exception. Now, whether that's true, that's just a report. Take it for what it's worth, right? That's what Andrew Benson has said, which a long list of FIA officials have left recently, and Wittich being the most impactful, I think, because his position has the biggest impact on the competitive state of play and the actual races themselves. So what I think about this is that, unfortunately, this job, as currently constructed, almost seems untenable. It seems like the kind of job that nobody wants, and that the person who gets it is only in for a very limited period of time, because there are too many judgment calls that end up going against you in a certain amount of time. There's a lot of things that you are going to be doing that you're going to be criticized for, that you can't really provide the justification for. And I look back at this past weekend, even that decision as to calling the red flag in qualifying. It's pretty standard procedure to red flag a session after everyone has had a chance to finish their hot laps that they've started in other series. I think the issue that Formula One gets itself into, though, is that they haven't established these precedents in terms of saying to everyone, here's how we're going to manage this situation before it happens. They're always reacting with the best of intentions after something happens. And then the justifications they give it can seem inconsistent or to have a different logic to them than what is claimed. Now, the race director does have to have overriding authority over matters of safety, and it's important that he does have that discretionary power to I would be careful how I word this, but break the rules in certain circumstances. Don't tell Massey, but that there has to be some discretion in terms of being able to override certain procedures in order to make a judgment call in an emergency or in a situation where, like, I recall one time where we were running short on time and they kind of made it up as they went. I think it was Japan a couple of years ago, and they were like, the clock was ticking and everything was getting dark, and they just said, you know what, that rule about how we have a 3-hour window, that's gone. Let's forget about that. And they just, they decided to do the race like a shortened race that went to time, but they kind of took that red flag time and didn't count it against the time limit because they would have run out. So there's certain times where race directors can make decisions that have to be done. But the problem is that they don't have a common logic to them that's explained in a way that people understand it in advance. So if we, go ahead.
Yeah, no. So here's my thing that ties in with exactly what you're saying right now, right? It's not being explained or presented enough, whether it's not being done clearly enough to the teams or whether it's not being done clearly enough to the fans. Of course, priority should be that clarity, and that plan A, plan B, plan C, typical Ferrari type thing, needs to go to needs to go to the teams and the drivers and all those involved. Sure. But I can't help but to draw parallels between how, I don't know if you watch a lot of rugby, right? but when you're making certain calls in rugby, you have the referee and those who are involved in the video, sort of like the video assistant referees. Their conversations get played out loud, and you can listen to and understand their reasonings behind the decisions and the calls that are being made. Um, we've I've been part of conversations with that being implemented into football and the Premier League or wherever in general. I feel like introducing that in F1, not for every single thing, but being able to present certain moments and certain clips of the conversations that happen in that race director, within that limit and constraint of that race direction sort of moment when decisions are being made and the conversations that are happening there, it would give a lot of context to the people that are involved, whether you are a racer, whether you're one of the team directors, or whether you're a fan. It helps you understand what goes on in that moment to give context versus everyone just going off the rails and getting mad and angry without understanding the context of things. Because the same way, the way you explained it, right? Generally, most fans don't understand the nuances behind making these calls. Most people don't really get the the way rules can be interpreted. So having these sort of key and crucial moments that during which decisions are made being aired to give context and ideas for people to understand why, that will lessen that burden to a certain extent. Again, it's a double-edged sword, sure, but at the same time, it will be very useful because transparency. You have transparency. Now, will the FIA do that? Probably not, because who wants transparency? Not MBS.
Well, I think there's different considerations with transparency. Now, one thing I will say is if Mohammed Ben Sulayem is concerned about swearing, perhaps having microphones in race control would not be a good idea, because I've been up in race control in regional and smaller events, and yeah, things can get a little heated up there. I think that there's certain things that happen in the administration of a race that don't need to be anybody's business. I do think that people deserve a right to do their job and not be scrutinized. I think that volunteers deserve the ability to do their job and not be named and shamed in any sort of investigation or report into something competitive that happened. Like, for say example, you know, if there was a issue that they wanted to do an investigation on Abu Dhabi or something in 21, you don't want to go right down to the level of every communication that's happening on every channel, because people are just doing their job. There doesn't need to be that level of scrutiny on everyone. Like, people have to have the ability to do that. But I think some level of being clear with people about what the expectations are going into a situation can avoid a lot of the uncertainty that happens when these decisions come down and people don't understand it. Because a lot of times it's a nothing burger, and I have to sit there and say, well, you know, in race control, this type of stuff happens all the time. People make these decisions to extend laps to people, or that, you know, their VSC doesn't get called until there's boots on the ground, and all this stuff that people just don't know about. If that was clearly communicated as to, okay, we're going to go, like, I don't know if you've ever watched a WEC race, but they'll say like safety car in 10, 9, 8 in this computer voice, right? And they'll count it down. And like race control will say safety car ending in 30 seconds, and then it'll count down. And then when they get it, they all get the indicator like on their, so there's none of this like virtual safety car all of a sudden is ending and there's a random, 3-second gap, and then we're racing again, and then half the field didn't get to pit, right? So that there's just this randomized randomized advantage. There's all these little things that they could say, hey, here's how to do it. And I think that the best example of this is what happened in IndyCar. A few years ago, the Indy 500 ended under yellow, and it was a really anticlimactic finish. It was something that nobody really enjoys when the Indy 500 ends under a yellow flag. It's very kind of a downer. And in American racing, NASCAR has the green, white checkers. So there's always this idea that races should end under green. And IndyCar said, you know what? We're going to, they didn't need to change the regulations. The race director just needed to say, if anything happens and we go full course yellow and the race looks like it's going to finish under yellow, we are going to throw a red flag. Like that's just what's going to happen. And you can expect that to happen. So everybody budget for that. That's what's going to happen. But then you get a situation like Abu Dhabi where nobody knows what's going to happen. Are we going to get a safety car? Are we going to finish under safety car? Are we going to resume? Is lap cars going to get through? Are we going to have a red flag like we did, a few races prior? Are we going, like, there's all these options that the race director can do, but no clear direction on which option the teams should expect in order to maintain the competitive integrity. And I think that the FIA and Formula One honestly have to work together on this, because this is not the FIA. This is all three. The FIA, Formula One management, and the teams all have to agree on any regulatory changes. So this has to be a cooperative effort that says, you know what? People do not understand our rules. Like, our rules might exist, but people don't understand them. And if people don't understand the rules, they're going to get frustrated. And they're going to say things that aren't true. They're going to get mad on social media. They're going to call your sport corrupt. They're going to call you corrupt. They're going to call it fixed. They're going to call it all this stuff that they're going to call it, even if it isn't, because it's not well explained to them what the rules are. And this is why I hope for the best for Rui Marques, because he is stepping into the hardest job in racing. And I really wish the guy all the best, because I think that he's being set up in a system that does not support the race directors in the decisions they need to make. And he's being put in this position at short notice with 3 races to go in a season, without having built up the relationships with the teams and the drivers coming in. Like, if they had done this at the end of the year and Marquez was coming in next year, or someone else was coming in next year, they could have prepped everybody and had him introduced, and have a philosophy, have an operating philosophy that's going to say how he's going to run things. But now he's just being put into this position, in the fire. And I feel for the guy. I wish him the best, but that cannot be an easy proposition for him.
No, it's definitely not, especially not with how much scrutiny race directors have been under the last few years, ever since AD21. Not just AD21. I think that entire 2021 season had so many insane calls and insane decisions. And I think that year was, for the lack of a better term, the start of the curse for race directors, right? And but with that being said, uh you're walking straight into the lion's den with this one. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong here, he has done well in F2 and F3 in the past.
I mean,
It's been a pretty, you were saying, sorry?
yeah, I mean, yeah, he's done a pretty good job there. I mean,
Yeah.
nothing's to the same level, though. Like, there's not the
No,
same
it's,
level of scrutiny in F3. It's a
of
whole
course,
different world.
completely, and I don't disagree with that. But we've all watched, at least among us, we've watched some F2 and F3, and even if we don't watch full races, we tend to catch highlights of it. So far, he hasn't put a foot wrong. Any calls that have needed to be made, he has made them justifiably so, and I have no complaints. And with that, all props to him for that. And I just hope it carries forward into F1. The last thing I want to see people do is to start getting their pitchforks and fire and flames and all that out ready for him when there's only 3 races left to go this season. He has done
Yeah.
a pretty good job throughout the year in F2 and F3. He deserves his props. He's being thrown straight into the Vegas Grand Prix, and everyone knows how much of a spectacle Vegas is going to be. Because that could be one, it's Vegas. Two, it could be where Max wins his title. There's going to be so much of a spotlight on that. And say even the most minute thing goes wrong, you know for a fact that even if it's a stewarding call, people are going to start jumping on him. And I hope that does not happen because he doesn't deserve that, especially given the year he's had in F2 and F3.
Let's just hope it's not John Herbert on the stewards, because then social media will just go insane.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be great.
I do feel for the criticism that the stewards get as well, but that's a topic for another Marshall's post in the future, because the system is not set up in a way that favors consistency, and in a lot of ways the inconsistency is by design. But can that be improved? If that is the goal, then I'm sure it could be.
Question for another day.
It's not clear what their goals are, which is the tough part. And I feel like Formula One needs to sit back and say, you know what, we need some more certainty around how we regulate our sport and what is the job of the ref, what isn't, and who are the different roles, and when do these things happen? Because it just every weekend I feel like there's some outrage on social media about something that people do not understand, but I almost feel like I don't blame them for not knowing how it works, because it's not readily understood or explained to anyone how it actually works. So how could people be expected to know? Which is why I'm here trying to explain it, because Formula One doesn't seem to think it's important.
Ironically enough, Liberty, for everything that they're trying to do to make F1 more marketable, number one thing, make F1 rules digestible for fans. They're not doing that. So Liberty need to get themselves straight, and everyone knows come on, man. Just if you want to do things for the fans, do it for the fans. If not, don't make such a big show of it.
Yeah, and I think just one more quick hit of news before we wrap here. We saw today that the FIA did make a change to regulation, so it is possible. And the regulation that they chose fit to change was one that has been in existence since I started watching Formula One in the 80s, and didn't seem to be causing any problems at all until this past weekend, when Alex Albon scratched himself from the race because he crashed in the Sunday qualifying, and they didn't fill his grid spot, which resulted in an empty grid spot, and confusion reigned, I guess, because of this, even though this situation tends to happen all the time. And it seems to be confusing to me why this is the thing that they feel is so important that they need to change it. And it just confuses me as to all the other things that need changing, why they can't address those, but they can somehow say that this was the hill that we needed to flatten today.
No, that if that's such a big issue, I don't think many people would have survived the 6-car fiasco way back when. What was that, 20 years ago?
Oh, right. Oh, yeah, the 2005 U.S. Grand Prix, where
exactly almost 20 years ago now, and I don't think any of the drivers who clearly got confused about missing the grid spots, everyone would just lose their heads about that race.
Yeah, the Minardis and the Jordans at the very back, and the massive gap in the grid. But I actually think this rule has a potential to confuse people even more, because what if somebody breaks down in the formation lap? Are you supposed to take his spot now, or do you continue to line up like where you were? Or if Lance Stroll decides to beach himself in a gravel trap again for no reason, Did you line up in his spot now? Like, it just seems like a rule change that nobody was asking for when there's all sorts of other things that need addressing. For example, the red flag rules and the VSC rules and the pit stop rules and the free tire change and there's so many things that they could be actually taking on that would improve the spectacle, the competitive integrity, and they're just fiddling around in the margins because nobody thinks that they can agree on real change. So hopefully someday they will commit to fixing the regulations, because other series prove that it can be done. If anyone watches any other series like IMSA, they'll have different regulations. Some of them are better, some of them are worse, but a lot of them have ideas that work better than what Formula One is using right now. And if Formula One was just open to looking at how some other series operate and how those rules could be applied to their own series, then they would have a much better show. Like in IndyCar, just a simple one. If you cause a red flag in qualifying, you lose your 2 fastest laps. So you're basically to the back of that group. Why can't we just say, do that?
So here's my thing. If we really are going to start talking about this, you're going to be diving too deep down a rabbit hole, because let's face it, the FOM are, hate it or like it, I love F1 to bits. But the reality of it is, it's a holier than thou attitude where they will not take things that are working in other series to improve this one, because they feel like this is the best and this is the pinnacle of everything.
And yet there are so many series that do many things better.
That's why I said it's that holier than thou complex, right? And it's going to be, we're going to send ourselves spiraling for this, but essentially all the best to Rui.
Yes, I hope that these next 3 races go absolutely smoothly. There are no issues. There are no red flags. There are no major incidents. And he can have a nice, relaxing winter, getting ready to do the job in the way he wants to do it next year.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, I think that just about wraps it up. Thanks for doing this, Hajit. It's the first of a few
Always
series
a pleasure,
here.
man.
I'm sure that we're going to have more rules and regulations talk to come in the future. We'll try and explain the rules when the rules don't make any sense. That's what we're here for. Yeah.
I'm actually excited for the rookie race, but again, topic for another day.
Absolutely. So let's just wrap up with the socials. So you can reach us at Shifting Happen on Threads and Instagram. What is it on X there, Ajit? Shifting Does Happen, I believe.
Shift Does Happen.
Shift Does Happen.
Yeah.
And then where can we find you?
For as long as I'm on Twitter, it's going to be Shiva Miiris, but if anything changes, you'll know here.
Absolutely. And you can find me at Double Waved Yellow, DBL Waved Yellow, on Instagram and Threads, which is a fun little community that we're starting to figure out in the absence of the bad place, or the other place. Let's call it the other place. Anyway, wherever you get your social media, you can find us, though. So cheers, and we'll catch you all next time.
Have a good night.